Tron Legacy was directed by Joseph Kosinski, and this is a video that is essentially the second shot at making a video like this. If you're somebody who has been on the channel for a while, then you might remember that in 2020, I actually did do a Tron Legacy video. That video is no longer on the channel, and the reason for that is because ever since I started doing these more retrospective-like videos, I realized that the format fit that movie a lot better, and I wanted to talk about it in a way that was a little different from the last time, because I feel like last time I didn't do that video justice enough, because the movie is a lot more than what it just comes off as maybe when it comes to critical reactions or something. And in the years since its release, it's gotten a lot of reappraisal and love and is often considered a cult classic now, very similar to how the first Tron was received in 1982. Which is a movie I have also revisited a bunch of times. In fact, a lot of times people will, talk about their inspirations in terms of pop culture. If I had to take one, it would probably be Kevin Flynn. A lot of times I talk like Kevin Flynn in real life. You'll find that often. So if you ever see me talking about something and being like, I don't know, man, it's like, man, the whole, affectation comes from Kevin Flynn. His whole, it's all in the wrists thing is from Kevin Flynn. And I even have a Flynn's t-shirt, which I'm ironically, like, for a video about Flynn, I'm not wearing the t-shirt in this video. The purpose of this is so to revisit the movie. And I think the cool thing about, the cool thing, that sounded like ghoul for a second. Take two. The cool thing about doing videos like this is that you get to also grow as someone who talks about movies. I think there is a very obtuse way of looking at it where it's like if you give one review, that's it. No such thing. There are movies that I have not liked in the past that I've revisited and liked more. Tron Legacy is one of those movies that I have definitely come to appreciate more and more over time. And while I still don't think it's a perfect movie, I definitely enjoy it more as I think about it, and I really did the first time I saw it, which was in 2011 actually. That time it came out, I was in the middle of school stuff. Unfortunately, I wasn't going for too many movies. I think the only movie I saw in theaters between November 2010 to March 2011 was Deathly Hallows Part 1. That was it. I wasn't really the avid theater goer as I am in my later years. And unfortunately, that meant missing out on a lot of stuff. Tron was one of those movies. That said, the day I was done with school stuff, the DVD for Tron Legacy came out in stores, and I still have that DVD copy. The movie did not do well in theaters. It originally bombed, and it did okay business. The reviews were not stellar, and a lot of the credit was going to the fact that, it looks visually great, but there's not much else. But I've also found that with the story that Legacy is tackling, especially when it comes to, trying to put the codependence on the technology that's within the game and essentially using the grid as this future thing and over-reliance on that, eventually coming to a point where, that AI that Kevin Flynn has instilled into it, his own likeness with Clue, essentially taking over and, creating this dystopic nightmare in terms of what the grid used to be. I think it makes a very interesting story, and when we talk about, the advance of technology these days with AI and other things coming in, the film becomes a lot more poignant to discuss and to talk about, what it's like to have AI that's helpful or whatever that, can cause something, negative if there's too much of a, systematic issue. But beyond all that, it also ends up being a story about a son trying to find his father. As we know from the first movie, Kevin Flynn is a game designer who's really, really good at his job, but then when NCOM doesn't really like him enough, he eventually tries to crack in the system and take down the master control program. He eventually does that in the first movie, but then the second one, he's been gone for a long time because he has disappeared into the game. And as a result of that, Sam Flynn, played by Garrett Hedlund, is someone who is trying to move on. He is the biggest shareholder for the company, but he's also someone who doesn't want anything to do with that company because his idea is everything should be out there to everyone in the world, much like his father would have wanted, and they're trying to do things in a way that he doesn't want. And as a result of that, he wants to stay away from the company. When he eventually gets a chance to reconnect with his father, he himself lands on the grid. And what it leads to is a very interesting neon-soaked adventure, which I had a really great time with revisiting revisiting recently. One of the things that immediately I remember with the first viewing that I had of it was that it's the first disc that ever had the IMAX format. So when the ship descends, the recognizer on Sam, and you see the screen expand, no disc of mine had ever done that before. I didn't buy the Blu-ray to The Dark Knight until much later. I didn't know that was already there. I remember the year after Tron Legacy, like the end of 2012, when The Dark Knight Rises dropped on Blu-ray and it had the IMAX format. I'm thinking, this is insane. Like, I have never seen this before. But that was the first experience I had with those changing, aspect ratios. I thought that was really, really cool. Daft Punk's score is something that I listen to at least twice a week every now and then, because it's just one of those scores that remains, funnily enough, very modern. It came out 13 years ago. It'll be 14 this year. And even now, it sounds like something that was done yesterday. It's very, very good. And the music is one of the biggest highlights. I would honestly say it's been time enough to call it one of the best scores of all time. But at least of the last decade, for sure. The visuals are dazzling. All the Kevin Flynn, Clue, de-aging gets a lot of flack. But in all honesty, I have seen some really bad de-aging over the years, and while that one was not great, I can honestly say it's not a bad start. That was one of the first movies to ever do it, and from there it's just gotten better and better over the years for sure, but it's kind of groundbreaking. They tried it the first time. Some of it worked, some of it did not work. In some shots, it actually does look really, really good. So it's just, one of those things where it becomes a bubblehead sometimes, So, all right, they tried their best with that. But the story that eventually does kick in after the first hour or so, where you're done with the visual experiences that do have happened in the second half as well. But once the storyline kicks in with why Kevin Flynn, older version, is still there, and how to try and get out of the grid, and then eventually going on this journey with Quora, played by Olivia Wilde, this entire storyline becomes a very interesting one. And while sometimes the momentum does disappear from the first half of that movie, it doesn't make it any less interesting. The third act of Legacy is fantastic, and rewatching it, I had such a great time with it. The entire disc sequence where Sam just knocks out all the guards and eventually they get away on one of those flyers, and then Clue and Co are chasing them, the whole reveal of Rinsler being Tron and then him snapping back and essentially saving them for a moment, only to then eventually be cornered by Clue once again towards the end when the portal opens. I loved that entire finale. I know it's a movie that gets a lot of mixed responses, and it still does. I mean, there are very mixed reviews for it out there. But I can't help but revisit Tron Legacy every now and then and find myself having such a great time with it. The performances, for the most part, really, really good. The way the story's constructed is very interesting. It feels very timely. All of the sequences, the original Disc War sequence, the first one that happens where, Sam is eliminating all of these guys, especially the one that's an action figure. I have a 3-inch version of you on my shelf. All of those things were really good. The end of line sequence where you meet Michael Sheen's Castor and he's having an absolute ball with it. That was really, really great. It does have some dialogue issues for sure. There are some CG issues every now and then. There are some pacing issues in the second half of the movie for sure. All of those things are very much a part of that narrative. It has a very simple story, but also simple stories, these are not really the negatives that sometimes they're made out to be. I think sometimes the simplest stories can be very effective, and in all a sense, by the time you're done with Tron Legacy, the storyline does come together pretty well. The ending with Kevin Flynn and Clue essentially destroying each other and Sam and Quora getting away via the portal was great. I loved the final moment with Alan. I thought that was so great. I love that they brought Bruce Boxleitner back for that role. I think he voiced Tron as well, like a couple of times in the dialogue during the movie. Like, I fight for the users, I think was him. But I like the way it ends with this idea of, a new world and Quora getting to see an actual sunrise that she's always dreamed of seeing. And that idea was also really, really good. and essentially that idea of how she is an ISO, that, a good program that could, change a lot of things in the world. Biodigital jazz, man. I don't know how much of that's going to continue in the new one that's coming. They're finally making a third movie with Jared Leto. I don't think this is following exactly after Legacy. I don't know what's going on the grid now. Even though this one pretty much ends with the fact that the grid is bombed and essentially it's back to square one. So I'm assuming it's a reset button. But we'll see. I don't know how many of the actors are returning. I know Jeff Bridges probably isn't. But we'll see what happens, and I'm still interested in seeing that movie whenever it does come out. God only knows where that's gonna go. But anyway, as long as, we have these two very good movies, Tron and Tron Legacy. I know, again, not for everybody. I know it has its share of, dissenters, for sure. But that just made for a very good way to look back on something. And with this series that I have going right now, it was nice to have a chance to talk about it once again. So I hope that this video was able to do a better job of conveying my thoughts on the movie. Like I said, it's not a flawless movie by any means, but I definitely do enjoy it a lot more as time has gone by. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are on Tron Legacy. What do you like about the movie, not like about the movie? We'll talk in the comments below. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again, and I will see you guys at the movies.